I bet you didn't know the chilling story behind the serene town of Petaluma, California. On October 1st, 1993, in a house nestled on a quiet street, a slumber party was underway. Giggles and secrets filled the air as young girls drifted off to sleep. But the serenity of the night was about to be shattered by Richard Allen Davis, a predator with a dark past. My name is Chillin' Jokes. Welcome to the Crime Vault, where we dive into the most intriguing crime stories. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping tales. Richard Allen Davis slipped into the Klaas home as silently as a phantom. He found Polly's room, the door slightly ajar. The sight of the sleeping girls, their innocence on full display, did nothing to deter him. He bound and gagged Polly's friends, their muffled cries swallowed by the night.
Muffled cries, terrified whimpers.
Polly stirred in her sleep as a large hand clamped over her mouth. Her eyes fluttered open, wide with terror, as she came face to face with the monster who had invaded her dreams. She struggled against his grip, her small body trembling with fear, but it was no use. Davis was bigger, stronger, his heart hardened by years of darkness. He scooped her up, silencing her screams with threats whispered against her skin.
Whispered threats inaudible.
The first rays of dawn painted the sky with hues of pink and orange, a stark contrast to the darkness that had descended upon Petaluma. The news of Polly's disappearance spread like wildfire, igniting a firestorm of fear and disbelief.
The community, united by grief and outrage, rallied together. They plastered the town with missing posters, Polly's smiling face staring back at them, a haunting reminder of the precious life that had been stolen. Volunteers poured in from neighboring towns, their faces etched with worry and determination. The media descended upon Petaluma, their cameras capturing every tear, every glimmer of hope, every agonizing detail of the ongoing search.
The idyllic image of Petaluma began to unravel. Fear, like a chilling wind, swept through the quiet streets, seeping into homes and hearts. Parents held their children a little tighter, their eyes scanning playgrounds and parks with a newfound vigilance. Whispers of Polly's abduction followed the residents of Petaluma like unwelcome shadows. The constant hum of police sirens became a haunting soundtrack to the town's collective nightmare. Every door knocked on, every question asked, every lead pursued, brought them no closer to finding Polly. The silence from Polly's abductor was deafening, fueling the flames of fear, leaving the community to grapple with the agonizing unknown. Just when the darkness threatened to completely engulf Petaluma, a glimmer of hope emerged from an unexpected source. A woman living in a remote area on the outskirts of town contacted the police with a disturbing but potentially crucial piece of information. She had seen a suspicious vehicle parked on her property on the night of Polly's disappearance. The woman's description of the vehicle, a white Ford van with distinctive markings, matched the description of a van belonging to Richard Allen Davis. The discovery of the van and the link to Richard Allen Davis injected a much-needed dose of urgency into the investigation. The search for Richard Allen Davis became a race against time. Law enforcement agencies from across the state joined forces, their combined resources dedicated to capturing the fugitive. Days later, a breakthrough. A tip from a vigilant citizen led police to a motel just outside of town.
Davis, disheveled and disoriented, was apprehended without incident.
Despite overwhelming evidence linking him to Polly's abduction, Davis refused to cooperate. His silence a cruel taunt to a community desperate for answers. News of Polly's disappearance spread like wildfire, leaping from the quiet confines of Petaluma to the bustling newsrooms of national media outlets. The story, a parent's worst nightmare, made real, gripped the nation. Television screens flickered with images of Polly's smiling face, her missing child poster plastered on telephone poles, and storefronts across the country. As days bled into weeks, the nation held its breath, clinging to the hope that Polly would be found safe. Every news bulletin, every update from the investigation was met with a mix of anticipation and dread. The investigation into Polly's disappearance was a relentless pursuit of every lead, no matter how small or insignificant it seemed. Law enforcement officers, their faces etched with grim determination, worked tirelessly, driven by a shared commitment to bring Polly home and bring her abductor to justice. Each passing day brought a fresh wave of tips and potential sightings, each one meticulously investigated, only to end in disappointment. The investigators, though weary and emotionally drained, didn't give up. The small town of Petaluma, once a symbol of tranquility and small town charm, found itself bound together by a shared grief that transcended social divides. Neighbors who had once exchanged polite smiles now offered each other solace and support. Volunteers continued to distribute missing posters, their hope flickering like a candle in the wind. The community, though battered by grief and fear, refused to let darkness extinguish the light of hope. As weeks morphed into months, the initial wave of shock and disbelief gave way to a numbing sense of despair. The media attention, once relentless, began to wane, the story of Polly Klaas fading from the headlines. Yet, even as hope dwindled, a flicker of determination persisted. Polly's family, their faces etched with the unimaginable pain of a parent's worst nightmare, refused to give up. Weeks stretched into an agonizing eternity for Polly's family and a community holding its breath. Then, on December 4th, 1993, the silence shattered. Richard Allen Davis, his face a mask of cold indifference, led investigators to a secluded clearing. There, beneath the skeletal branches of a gnarled oak, lay the body of 12-year-old Polly Klaas. The news ripped through Petaluma like a hailstorm, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The nation, which had followed Polly's story with a mix of dread and desperate hope, reeled from the news, the brutal reality of her fate shattering the illusion of safety. With the discovery of Polly's body, the investigation took on a chilling new urgency. No longer a search for a missing child, it was now a homicide investigation, a quest for justice for a life stolen too soon. The eyes of the law, once focused on finding Polly alive, now turned their full, unforgiving gaze on Richard Allen Davis.
The evidence against Davis was overwhelming. Fibers found in his van matched those from the carpet in Polly's bedroom. Soil samples from his shoes linked him to the remote clearing where her body was discovered. And perhaps most damning of all, a fingerprint, lifted from a piece of duct tape found at the Klaas home, belonged to none other than Richard Allen Davis.
The walls were closing in, the weight of the evidence forming an inescapable noose around Davis's neck. Yet, he remained defiant, his cold, emotionless eyes betraying no remorse, no guilt, no humanity. He had played a deadly game with the lives of a child, her family, and an entire community. And now, as the game neared its end, he seemed determined to cling to the only power he had left, the power of silence. The weight of the evidence was insurmountable. The prosecution, armed with forensic proof, presented a compelling case. They painted a chilling portrait of Richard Allen Davis, a career criminal with a history of violence. Then, in a shocking turn of events, Richard Allen Davis confessed. Not on the witness stand, but in a jailhouse interview. He spoke of the abduction in chilling detail, his words devoid of remorse.
I kidnapped Polly, drove her to a secluded clearing, and silenced her cries for help.
His words sent shockwaves through the courtroom and beyond. The jury's verdict was swift and decisive, guilty on all counts. Richard Allen Davis, the monster who had haunted the nightmares of Petaluma and a nation, was convicted of first-degree murder with special circumstances. The judge, his voice heavy with the gravity of the sentence, condemned Davis to death.
Justice, it seemed, had been served. But at what cost? Polly Klaas, the bright-eyed girl with a contagious laugh, was gone. Her future stolen, her light extinguished. Her family, forever scarred by the unimaginable loss, faced a future forever darkened by her absence.
The community of Petaluma, once a symbol of innocence and small-town charm, would forever bear the scars of the tragedy. The case, etched into the town's collective memory, served as a chilling reminder that evil could lurk even in the most idyllic of places.
And Richard Allen Davis? He was destined to spend the rest of his days on death row, his life a testament to the darkest impulses of humanity, his name forever linked to the senseless murder of a child who had captured the heart of a nation.
The trial of Richard Allen Davis became a spectacle unlike any other, a media frenzy that gripped the nation. Cameras crowded the courtroom, capturing every twitch of Davis's face and every tear shed by Polly's family.
The prosecution, led by Cliff Harris, presented a methodical and heartbreaking case. They laid bare Davis's depravity using DNA evidence and fingerprint analysis.
The defense, led by Barry Collins, faced an uphill battle. They tried to paint Davis as a product of a broken system, but their arguments seemed hollow against the overwhelming evidence.
The nation watched, transfixed, as the trial unfolded. Every evening, news anchors dissected the day's proceedings.
As the trial progressed, the nation's outrage grew. Polly Klaas's story had touched a nerve, awakening a collective fear that lay dormant beneath the surface of everyday life.
Parents hugged their children a little tighter, communities rallied together, and the demand for justice for Polly became a deafening roar.
The courtroom became a stage for a nation's grief and anger. Polly's mother, Eve Nickel, her voice trembling with barely contained emotion, delivered a heart-wrenching testimony, recounting the last time she had seen her daughter alive, the agonizing weeks of uncertainty, and the crushing blow of discovering her daughter's fate.
Mark Klaas, Polly's father, became a reluctant spokesperson for a nation demanding change. He channeled his grief into advocacy, calling for stricter laws, increased awareness about child safety, and a justice system that truly protected the innocent.
The trial of Richard Allen Davis was no longer just about one man's crimes. It had become a catalyst for a national conversation about child safety, about the responsibility of society to protect its most vulnerable members, and about the need for a justice system that delivered both accountability and healing. After weeks of agonizing testimony and mountains of evidence, the jury delivered its verdict, guilty. Richard Allen Davis was found guilty on all counts. A collective gasp filled the courtroom, followed by a wave of emotion. Tears of relief and sadness flowed freely. For the prosecution, it was a bittersweet victory. Cliff Harris acknowledged the verdict with a solemn nod. For the defense, it was a crushing defeat. Barry Collins accepted the verdict with quiet dignity. The verdict brought closure but could not erase the pain. It could not bring Polly back. True justice would forever remain elusive. The trial of Richard Allen Davis may have ended, but the ripples of its impact continued to spread. Polly Klaas's name became synonymous with a nationwide movement for child safety. Her tragic story, a stark reminder of the fragility of innocence. In the wake of the verdict, legislation bearing Polly's name was passed, strengthening penalties for crimes against children, improving communication between law enforcement agencies, and increasing resources for child abduction investigations. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of Polly Klaas was the way she united a nation in grief and in a shared determination to protect its children. Her story ignited a conversation, sparked a movement, and forced the nation to confront uncomfortable truths about its own vulnerabilities. The trial of Richard Allen Davis was a tragedy on many levels, a stark reminder of the capacity for evil that exists in the world. But in the aftermath, in the outpouring of grief and anger, in the demand for justice and change, there emerged a glimmer of hope, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to find light, even in the darkest of times. A life, not a legacy. The media circus moved on, seeking new tragedies to dissect. The yellow ribbons faded, the candlelight vigil ceased, and Petaluma began to heal, but the memory of Polly Klaas lingered. Her name etched into the hearts of a community. Transcended headlines, it became a symbol, a rallying cry for change. But remember Polly as a child, a daughter, a friend. Her life should not be defined solely by her death. Remember her love of animals, her passion for books, her infectious laughter. Remember the joy she brought to those who knew her, for the indelible mark she left on their hearts. A time for vigilance, not fear. The world can be a dark and unpredictable place. Evil exists, as surely as the sun rises and sets. But to succumb to fear, to allow the actions of a few to extinguish the light of hope, would be to allow evil to triumph. Polly's story taught us many difficult lessons, but perhaps the most important one is the need for vigilance without succumbing to fear. We owe it to Polly, to all children, to ourselves, to remain vigilant, to protect the innocent, to speak out against injustice. We must be the guardians of hope, the champions of light, the voices for those who have been silenced. Let us honor Polly's memory, not by shrinking from the darkness, but by embracing the light. Let us create a world where children can laugh without fear, where dreams can take flight, and where the memory of Polly Klaas serves as a beacon of hope, reminding us that even in the face of unspeakable tragedy, the human spirit can endure, overcome, and ultimately triumph. Thank you for watching. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and together we can make a difference. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel for more content.